What up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Ask Paul, the podcast where you can ask me any electrical question you want by simply going over to our Ask Paul portal at paulabernathy.com. That's paulabernathy.com. And you can ask me any question you want. Just simply fill out the information in our portal. Click the submit button and it will come to me, and I'll either answer it in an email to you directly, one-on-one, a mano, or you, if selected, will be utilized on an upcoming podcast, much like today's podcast. Well, today's podcast, I should say, and all of this is brought to you by Electrical Code Academy Incorporated, our corporation here in Texas, where we have our residential programs, commercial programs, grounding and bonding courses as well. You want to really understand grounding and bonding to further your career, but also our infamous Fast Tracks program. And that is what people go to learn the National Electrical Code. Times have changed. It's an immersive online program with a lot of quizzes, interaction. You get to join us on Wednesday nights for our live sessions. There's questions can be sent to me via email. It is really more interactive rather than the static way of learning of the past, flipping through a code book or watching some DVDs, listening to other people's conversations instead of getting out the core material that you need to learn the code. Our program is dedicated just to that. It is 100% online, can do any browser. You can do our program from a cell phone all the way up to a desktop. Choice is yours. We hope that you'll check that out. Go over to electricalcodeacademy.net and you will see our links over there to all of our courses and all our programs. And again, of course, watch some of our videos to learn a little bit more about what the programs have to offer. All right, so tonight's question came from a student who said, "Dear Paul, please explain calculating 15 amp and 20 amp branch circuits to help me find the minimum number of circuits necessary for the general lighting and general use loads in accordance with Article 220. Okay, great question. Without a doubt, you're liable to get something on an exam, or in real world, you do need to know how to calculate these out. Although at the end of the day, we probably put more branch circuits in a house than we need anyway, and that's okay. But it's one thing to know how to do it and calculate it out. So we're going to do that tonight, and I will do both 15 amp and 20 amp because you have a choice. You can put 15 amp receptacles where they're allowed, bedrooms, things like that. Of course, kitchen countertops, small appliance branch circuits are 20 amp, laundries 20 amp, garage 20 amp if you have a garage, things like that. Of course, you can have 15 amps as well in a garage once you meet that initial requirement for at least one 20 amp branch circuits. So many different things that you can do that you really need to know how to do these calculations. So we're going to do that tonight and hopefully helps explain a little bit to you how you're going to do some of these basic calculations. And you never know. You might get them on an exam. You might get a question that wants to know, basically tells you the square footage and you need to figure it out. Okay, so we're going to show you how to do that. How many branch circuits would you need to satisfy the code? Okay, so let's look at our first example here. So let's say we have a one-family dwelling. And of course, we know that in 220.12J, and you're in the 2020 edition of the National Electrical Code, so you can always pause this podcast, go grab your code books, go to 220.12 and you'll notice J. J will tell you that it's 3 VA per square foot. Now, it used to be in the 2017 edition, that was up in 220.12, and it wasn't down in J. You basically would look at the table at 220.12, the table, and that's where you'd see dwelling units, and that's where you get the 3 VA per square foot. So that has changed for the 2020 edition. To 220.12, the table, the VA per square foot, has nothing to do with dwellings anymore, okay? So when we're dealing with a dwelling, we're going to be in 220.12J. So that's 3 VA per square foot. So there's a couple givens here. We know that it's a 1,400 square foot one-family dwelling. We know that the multiplier for us is going to be 3 VA per square foot, okay? So we're going to do the math here. So we're going to go 1,400 times 3 VA, and that's going to be 4,200 VA, or volt amperes. Now, the first thing that we want to do here is say, okay, we need to take that, and we know what? We're dealing with general lighting and general use receptacles, right? And those are 120 volts. Now, we're using nominal voltage. Code tells us to do that. We're going to be using 120. So we need to find the overall amps that we're working with here. All right, so how do we do this? Well, it's 4200 VA divided by 120. So it's a 120 volt nominal system. And again, we're just going for the general lighting, general use receptacles. And that equals 4200 divided by 120 equals 35 amperes. Now we know the amps, and we know that we want these to be 15 amp branch circuits. So logically, we're going to now take this 35 and we're going to divide it by 15. And that's going to give us the number that's necessary in order to be able to supply these 15 amp branch circuits. So 35 divided by 15 is 2.33. Of course, you can't have 0.33 of a circuit. Okay, we're not rounding amps here. We're talking about circuits here. So I have to go up to the next full size. So I need at least 3 overall 15 amp circuits to be able to supply the general lighting and general use receptacles. Now remember, we're not talking about small appliance. We're not talking about laundry. We're not talking about garage circuits if it's required, the minimum of 120 amp. We're not talking about that. We're talking about those that are permitted to be 15 amps, and we're talking about general lighting and general use. Okay, so in that case, we need 3. So in this 1,400 square foot, we need a minimum of 3 branch circuits that are 15 ampere in order to handle that general lighting and general use receptacle. Now, I know that you're probably going to have way more than that, but I'm just telling you, for an exam, that's how you would break it down to find the number of branch circuits necessary based on what they ask you in the question. Now, asking that question a little different, if they say that you're going to do it with 20 amp rated devices, or you need 20 amp rated branch circuits, then the concept is still the same. You would do 1,400, and you would do that times 3, because it's 3 VA per square foot, right? And that's going to be 4,200 VA. You're going to do the same thing. You're going to take that total overall VA. You're going to divide that by 120, because these are 120 volt loads. And that's going to give you 35 amps. That did not change. What does change is now you're going to divide that 35 into 20, which gives you 1.75. And again, you can have 0.75 of a circuit. So it's going to need to have at least two 20 amp circuits to be able to satisfy the general use and general lighting. Now, I know and you know that in a dwelling, you're going to have way more than that. But if you think about an exam question, it's simply asking you how many branch circuits are necessary, minimum, to be able to handle the general use and general lighting application. And that's how you would do that math. Okay? Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. So hopefully you got something out of that. That's just a simple question that was asked, how to do the calculation. All right, so let's just kind of give you a little bit of something to think about before we end this session. So general purpose branch circuits, they're going to feed things like the lighting and receptacles. Of course, they could feed both. General purpose overcurrent protection shall not exceed 15 amps for 14 gauge, 20 amps for 12 gauge, 30 amps for 10 gauge. All these are small conductor rules in 240.4D. Now, branch circuit conductors shall have an ampacity not less than the maximum load to be served. So you're going to have to know your calculation, and you size your branch circuits accordingly. And so, of course, you can have lights and receptacles on the same circuit. And we're talking about general purpose right now. We're not talking about small appliances, laundry, and what have you like that. We are simply talking about general purpose. With that said, there are some required branch circuits that you need to be aware of in a dwelling. And that is, you have to have a minimum of 2 20 amp small appliance branch circuits, 210.11C1. Okay, and of course, also reiterates that in 210.52B1 as well when it gives you those serving the countertop requirements. You have to have at least 1 20 amp laundry branch circuit is required in 210.11C2. There are some exceptions to that when you have multifamily dwelling and things like that, but for 1 and 2 family, it's required. You have to have a minimum of 120 volt, 20 amp bathroom branch circuit is required in 210.11C3. You're not adding any additional VA for that, by the way. You just have to have the branch circuit, so that's a required branch circuit. If you have a garage, you're required to have at least 1 20 amp brand circuit serving that garage. Of course, you can have other brand circuits as well in that garage, but you have to have at least one of the 20 amp. That means I could have another 15 amp in there for something specific if I wanted, but you have to have at least one 20 amp there. So these are required brand circuits that you have to have. Okay, so in a future episode, we will talk about the issues of ampacity ratings of receptacles, what you can put breaker sizes when you have a single receptacle in an individual brand circuit. For example, you can't take a 20 amp receptacle and put it on a 15 amp overcurrent device, but you can have a 15 amp overcurrent device and put it on a 20 amp receptacle. It's perfectly fine. So there are different things that you can do. So we'll cover that in an upcoming episode. Hopefully you got something out of this episode, basically answering those questions about how to size general lighting and general use receptacle circuits if you get that kind of question on an exam. Okay. Till next time, stay safe, folks, and God bless.